the mad emperor, who made Rome bleed. Rome once had an emperor so insane his very name became a curse. Caligula, the man who turned the empire into a nightmare stage. His reign lasted only 4 years, but those years were soaked in blood and madness. The story begins with a child growing up surrounded by death. Caligula was the son of Germanicus, Rome's golden general. As a boy, he followed his father on campaigns, dressed in tiny soldier's boots. That nickname stuck. Caligula, Little Boots. But behind the nickname was a boy destined for terror. His father died suddenly, likely poisoned. His family was hunted down in Rome's brutal palace politics. Caligula watched relatives starve, executed, or driven to suicide. By the time he became emperor, his mind was already cracked. At first, the people loved him. He freed prisoners, gave out gifts, and threw extravagant games. Rome thought it had a benevolent young ruler. They had no idea they'd unleashed a monster. It started with whispers of bizarre behavior. Caligula would talk to the moon as if it were his lover. He dressed as gods and demanded shrines in his own honor. He even declared himself not just divine, but the living god of Rome. Soon, his paranoia took hold. Senators were executed for imagined insults. One man was killed simply because he looked at Caligula's new shoes. The emperor's laughter echoed as blood filled the Senate floor. Caligula's cruelty became theatrical. He forced parents to watch their children executed. He dined while prisoners were tortured before him. To him, suffering was entertainment. But his madness wasn't limited to humans. Caligula adored his horse, Incitatus. He fed it golden oats and jeweled wine, and even planned to make it a senator of Rome. To mock the Senate, he declared Incitatus could rule better than them. The senators laughed nervously, but none dared refuse. In Rome, the line between absurdity and terror blurred, and Caligula thrived in that chaos. His spending spiraled into madness. He built floating palaces on ships across the Bay of Naples. He staged massive games where thousands of animals were slaughtered. Rome bled wealth, while Caligula bled its people. He once ordered bridges built across the sea, not for conquest, but to ride across on horseback as a god. Thousands of slaves died building this vanity project, all to feed one man's delusions. Caligula even declared war on the ocean itself. He marched his army to the shores of Gaul and commanded them to attack the waves. Soldiers filled their helmets with seashells, trophies of a war against Neptune. Rome's generals were humiliated, but to refuse was death. Caligula returned to Rome parading seashells as spoils of victory. The empire watched in silent horror. His personal life was equally disturbing. He allegedly slept with his sisters. He flaunted these incestuous affairs at banquets and forced senators' wives into his bed for sport. One night, he married a woman, then divorced her the very next morning. His whims had the force of law, and Rome's citizens lived in terror of his gaze. Then came the famine. Instead of feeding his starving people, Caligula built more palaces, fountains, and gold statues of himself. He even ordered granaries burned just to watch the chaos. Desperation filled the streets of Rome. Meanwhile, Caligula bathed in perfumes and feasted on banquets. He toasted the empire's misery with jeweled cups of wine. Rome had become his stage and his prison of madness. But paranoia breeds enemies. Even Caligula's guards began to whisper. Senators plotted in the shadows, waiting for the right moment. That moment came on January 24th, 41 AD. Caligula walked through the palace tunnels after a performance. Suddenly, steel flashed. His own bodyguards turned on him, stabbing again and again. Rome's mad emperor collapsed in a pool of his own blood. His wife was murdered. His infant daughter's skull smashed against a wall. The dynasty of madness ended in slaughter. The man who made Rome bleed bled out in the dust. But here's the chilling truth. Caligula's reign was short, but unforgettable. His name still means little boots. Yet history remembers him as the monster in imperial sandals. Rome thought it had seen madness before him, but Caligula proved power itself can become a disease that infects an empire and leaves only blood in its wake. This was the emperor who declared war on the sea, who crowned a horse senator, who turned death into theater, and himself into a god of nightmares. His reign is a warning whispered through history that absolute power doesn't just corrupt. Sometimes it drives a man insane and drags an entire empire down with him. Caligula's Rome was a world of blood and madness, a dark reminder of what happens when fear rules over reason. The mad emperor is gone, but his legacy still bleeds through time.